Welcome, everyone. We're going to start the webinar now. So I'm really pleased to welcome you here on behalf of the Community College Research Center and our project team. I'm really glad that you're joining us for this webinar. The title is What Comes After Developmental Education Reform, Innovative Teaching Practices and Student Supports. We're eager to share about this project and the innovative work being carried out by 4 community colleges who have been our research partners, as well as members of a multi-college community of practice over the last year. I'm Amy Brown, a research associate at CCRC, and I'm joined in the webinar by my colleague Carl Lewandowski, a research assistant at CCRC. Several other members of our CCRC team are also online, and each college in the community of practice has one representative who will engage in a panel discussion and several other team members who are also joining us online. Funding for this project was provided by the Gates Foundation. To begin, I'll briefly share the motivation for this project and how innovative teaching and support practices can help address barriers that students continue to face in college contexts where developmental education reforms have been in place for several years. Before we jump into the presentation, though, I just wanted to note that you can please write your questions in the chat throughout the webinar. We'll adjust them to the best of our ability, including during a short question and answer period near the end of the webinar. You're also welcome to reach out to us afterward with additional questions. Okay, so to jump in, there's a very strong evidence base in support of major reforms to developmental education that have been implemented over the past decade. We've seen increasing adoption of reforms like corequisite remediation, multiple measures assessment, and math pathways, and we know that more incoming college students have both access to college-level math and English courses, and they're completing those courses more often in their first year as a result of these reforms. So students are also increasingly able to select a math sequence that's relevant to their interests and aligned to varied academic and career goals. And the field has learned a great deal about how to implement various reforms and what their impacts are for students. Next slide. Despite this progress, disparities in outcomes are present by race, ethnicity, gender, and income, many of which were present before reform initiatives took place. Many of these disparities have negatively impacted Black, Hispanic, and low-income students and tend to persist even as students generally are positively impacted by these reforms. This is not unexpected, given that very few large-scale reform efforts are explicitly designed to remedy differential outcomes by race or other characteristics. To tackle these disparities, colleges must consider the specific needs and experiences of students who are not yet well served in the reformed developmental education landscape and explore what's contributing to those disparities in outcomes. This project centers institutional self-inquiry and faculty expertise with the aim to develop innovative practices that address barriers that some students still face. Next slide. The project is called the Developmental Education Reform Innovation Incubator. It's a little bit of a mouthful. We've been hosting and supporting a year-long community of practice called the Innovation Incubator, or the COP, which stands for Community of Practice. We use the term incubator to emphasize the importance of protecting and facilitating the development of new practices. The colleges are not only working in their respective teams to incubate these practices, but sharing them with the rest of the community for feedback in their development process. Each team has 4 to 8 members, most of whom are faculty, with smaller numbers of administrators and student support staff. Teams received a stipend to support their work across the year. Next slide. Thanks. Before we convened the community of practice, the CCRC team conducted a literature review to examine the factors that contribute to outcome disparities and a landscape scan of promising practices being implemented in the field. We published a report this month that I think is in the chat that details promising examples and approaches that can be integrated into or used in conjunction with proven developmental education reforms to reduce disparities. I'm going to talk through a couple of the visuals on this slide. So the colored wedges in the pie depict 5 different domains at the classroom and institutional levels that can be changed or influenced to positively impact student learning and success. Each domain contains several relevant factors that affect student experiences, and these domains overlap and interact with each other. So within course curriculum, the use of contextualized, culturally relevant curriculum has been shown to increase student engagement, motivation, and learning. Within teaching decisions, faculty have used student-centered approaches, just-in-time guidance, and faculty support for students' sense of belonging and self-efficacy. Within the psychological dimensions of learning, faculty and college staff have worked to address math anxiety, math confidence, and stereotype threat. Within academic supports, colleges have implemented embedded tutoring, peer mentorship, and proactive student support strategies. And within campus culture, the extent to which students' cultural backgrounds are valued and the degree to which students can form meaningful relationships with faculty and staff play an important role in influencing student success. Looking to the right side of the slide, the gray box includes broader societal and systemic conditions like school funding, discrimination, income disparities, and housing instability that shape students' educational experiences and outcomes, but are largely outside of the direct control of colleges. Structural reform decisions within developmental education include refinements to placement policies and the structural design of co-requisite courses, among others. Faculty may or may not be able to influence some of these structural decisions. So if we take the factors in the colored circle, taken together with societal and systemic conditions and these structural reforms, they shape students' educational experiences and outcomes for students in reformed developmental education contexts. We wanted to explore these factors in detail because we are thinking about our future work and the work of the community of practice, where practitioners are working to refine developmental education reforms within their contexts and how important it is to understand potential drivers of disparities to inform their future innovation. So by finding opportunities to address these challenges, reformers can generate better experiences and outcomes for a wider range of students. Next slide. I'm moving through content a little bit quickly. If you want to look at it in more detail, please refer to the links with our research report and inquiry tool. This slide just conveys the inquiry process, which is laid out in our inquiry tool, which is a worksheet type document that teams can use. So this is designed for teams of faculty, staff, and administrators who have already implemented developmental education reforms and are looking to develop and implement new practices within teaching, learning, and support to improve more students' experiences and outcomes in college-level math and English. So as part of the Innovation Incubator, the colleges use this inquiry process to develop and implement their innovative practices. The process begins by identifying the developmental education reform context they would like to focus on and what outcomes they would like to improve. For example, maybe students' completion of their coursework and major assessments, students' use of academic and support services, or students' enrollment in the next term. And then they examine varied data sources to understand better which students may have lower outcomes. The second step is reflecting on what those students may be experiencing, including disconnection from the course content or a limited sense of belonging. Then the teams decided what experiences they could influence and improve. They developed instructional and support practices that address those experiences and were aligned with the factors that are likely contributing to those disparities. And the teams are currently in the process of assessing the changes by measuring and observing students' academic behaviors and attitudes, as well as faculty attitudes and areas for additional training and support. Finally, the college teams will return to the beginning of the cycle to ask themselves if they would like to address other outcomes or student experiences. So now I'm going to turn it over to my colleague Carl, who will provide brief background on the college teams and the practices they've developed, and he will facilitate a panel discussion with a member from each of the colleges. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Amy. So I'm excited to talk about what our 4 participating colleges have been working on over the last academic year. At Arkansas State University Mid-South, they've been seeking to build community and increase engagement among students in their co-requisite or structured learning assistance courses. They're doing this using collaborative classroom activities as well as practices like regular polling and reflective writing assignments that allow instructors to learn about and respond to student experiences and needs. Volunteer State Community College in Gallatin, Tennessee, is developing professional development opportunities to support faculty who teach co-requisite or learning support students, including by recruiting a cohort of learning support faculty to participate in a summer institute where they will design instructional practices that they can implement in their learning support courses. At Hartnell College, there is a pre-existing successful program called Math Academy, which is a pre-semester program that connects incoming students with math faculty and with campus resources. As part of the COP, Hartnell has been working on expanding this Math Academy experience to also include their dual enrollment secondary students. They're also identifying key teaching practices and culturally relevant activities that they can integrate into Math Academy and share with the field. And at the Community College of Baltimore County, they're developing and piloting interdisciplinary microlessons in which faculty from Gateway English and Gateway Math courses visit each other's classrooms to support students in the other discipline with study skills and problem-solving skills from the other discipline. These microlessons are also seeking to improve student knowledge about course offerings in the other discipline to encourage students to complete their Gateway coursework in the first academic year. The CCBC team is also reinstating professional learning opportunities for co-requisite math and English faculty to improve interdisciplinary collaboration, including through a successful think tank event that they held this January. So over the last academic year, we've also had the opportunity to visit each of these four colleges and to speak with students at these four colleges. And in these focus groups, we saw some themes that emerged across the institutions. For instance, we heard that students felt that collaboration with their peers supported learning. This encourages colleges to expand opportunities for collaboration among students, which is part of what Arkansas State University Mid-South is doing. We also heard that students reported feeling more confident when help was accessible, which encourages efforts to connect students proactively to campus resources. That's part of Hartnell's Math Academy, in which tutors and student support staff work directly with students and form lasting relationships. Students did report also that lasting relationships with peers and instructors decrease feelings of anxiety and increase a sense of trust. For instance, we heard this at Volunteer State when students described how having the same instructor for college level and co-requisite math helped support their learning. We also heard that students select courses based more on the course timing and their own schedules rather than on information about the course offering and about their placements. This sort of suggests that students might be missing out on opportunities that could be potentially beneficial and that are available to them. At CCBC, the microlessons, which seek to improve student knowledge of course offerings in the other discipline, helps to address this issue. Each of these student experiences is an example of something that could be a factor that would impact student gateway completion. So these experiences can point the way to potentially impactful, innovative practices in instruction and student support. At this point, I'm very excited to introduce our four panelists. We are joined today by Shelley Sullins, who is Assistant Dean for Academic Achievement and a mathematics instructor at Arkansas State University Mid-South. We're also joined by Aaron Mann, who is Dean of Humanities at Volunteer State Community College. We're joined by Jason Garrett, who is the Acting Dean of Academic Affairs, Social and Behavioral Sciences, and Director of Student Academic Support and Foster and Kinship Care at Hartnell College. And by Mary Elizabeth Gore, who is Assistant Professor of Mathematics at Community College of Baltimore County. Thank you all so much for joining us today. So I am going to start off with a question for each of the four panelists. We talked when we discussed the inquiry process about starting with observations and data. So as each of your teams worked to identify why some students weren't succeeding and considered what practice you could develop to address that, What data did you look at, and what did you or others at your college notice about students' experiences? Jason, would you start us off?
Yeah, thank you. Hartnell College is a Hispanic serving institution in California's Salinas Valley, and more than 80% of our students identify as Latinx. For years, we watched math remain one of the most persistent barriers to student success. Institution wide pass rates hovered in the low to mid 60s, probably like many of your colleges. And in a course like pre-calculus, only about half of students without academic support made it through. When Assembly Bill 705 and Assembly Bill 1705 in California eliminated the developmental math on-ramp, it made the urgency undeniable. Students who might have once had a slower entry into college level math were now arriving directly into transfer level courses. The question stopped being, are students ready? And started being, what are we doing to make them ready? What our academic support staff and our faculty began noticing, and what the data confirmed, is that the barrier wasn't purely a skills gap. It was belonging. It was relevance. As a Hispanic serving institutions, our students were sitting in math classrooms that didn't reflect their lives or their communities. Math Academy became our laboratory for answering that. One of our faculty members, and I saw her out there in the audience, Leticia Contreras, had her pre-calculus students in Math Academy choose a city meaningful to their family history. They built physical maps, strings, push pins, cork boards, and used them to model population growth, a foundational calculus skill. But more importantly, they built relationships with each other, with peer tutors, and with their professor before the term began. That community doesn't just feel good, it shows up in the data. Math Academy participants in pre-calculus are more likely to attend tutoring than their peers who didn't participate in Math Academy, and they pass their math course at rates 30 to 40% higher than students without support. When you humanize math and contextualize it in students' lived experiences, when active group learning replaces passive instruction, math confidence and course success increase. The data and the corkboard are telling the same story.
Thank you, Jason. Mary Elizabeth, could you tell us about what your team saw at CCBC?
Yes, thank you. Well, the Summers Institute began, and we quickly realized that our group had several projects that were really different from one another. So we needed to focus in and find something that we could work on together. We all teach gateway classes in our group, and the inquiry tool allowed us to see that we were teaching the same students. And I know that seems quite obvious, but we can have tunnel vision at times when it comes to seeing our students. So we realized that we needed to start looking at them a little more holistically. We also realized that we were teaching skills that overlap between our two fields of study. Um, in our conversations, the math faculty shared that students would often say that this class, whether it was a stat class or their college algebra class or finite, whichever one they were in, was the one thing standing between them and graduation. Which the inquiry tool allowed us to realize that we needed to reduce the time for students to complete their math and English credit level courses. And I like to say it wasn't sooner than later, it was better than sooner than last, because they were leaving it to their last class. So in addressing that, English faculty came to our classes, or came to my class rather, to help with the reading and writing that is in a statistics course, and I'll talk more about that later. But math faculty went into the English classes to help students determine what math course they needed to take and encourage them to take it sooner. We also used this as an opportunity to promote our new statistics class that did not have any algebra prerequisites, so many students were now able to take it sooner than later. And in doing that, we discovered roadblocks that we weren't ready for, which students had trouble just accessing their placement scores. They would receive them after doing a test, throw them in their backpacks, didn't know where to find them. So we had to coach students on what to do with that. And they didn't really understand their placement scores. So we kind of came into the classes and acted as sort of a an advisor of sorts. I wouldn't say we're official advisors, and trying to help students understand what their next step would be. Um, and my dean famously said, like, when we were individuals, that is math and English, we kind of were focusing on pass rates a lot. But when we came together, we started really focusing on our students' completion. And so kind of as a joint effort. And I'll share more about what we did later.
Thank you so much, Mary Elizabeth. Erin, could you tell us a bit about what's going on at Volunteer State?
Yeah, and this is going to build on some themes that Mary Elizabeth and Jason set up. So one of the nice things about being in a system is that we have lots of data at our fingertips, and so we are constantly looking at the Tennessee Board of Regents data and comparing our outcomes in our learning support classes to what other colleges in the system are doing. But as Mary Elizabeth kind of said, we we're approaching them with the mindset that math solves math's problem, English solves English problem, reading solves reading's problems, and never cross the streams. And so we had a lot of initiatives going on in each of those areas, but they were primarily working in a siloed way, while at the same time we were seeing increasing demand for learning support classes in that sort of post-pandemic environment where students were coming in really increasingly underprepared. And we were seeing that across faculty who were teaching learning support, we were having pretty uneven results. And there just was no um, sustained systemic communication between faculty and the different disciplines. So ultimately, the data that got us to our intervention was the qualitative reports from faculty of things that they were trying, things that weren't working for them, frustrations that they were having. And when we finally sat the faculty all down in a room and said, okay, what is happening in math? What is happening in English? And let them have those conversations. We started seeing a spark of energy and excitement among the faculty that we felt we could build on to better support the students in a way that was much more programmatic and that kept the faculty in the individual disciplines from feeling like they were going it alone as we were seeing an increasing demand and an increasing need among our students. And like Mary Elizabeth said, there was a better sense that we are all working towards the goal of completion and not just the goal of success in an individual class.
Thank you, Erin. And Shelley, could you tell us a bit about what's going on at ASU Mid-South?
Yes, sir. Well, we initially looked at several sources to see what the students' experiences were. We looked at the attendance records, the course success rates, withdrawal patterns, the student polls, as well as we listened to the instructor feedback in real time, right? And what we heard from the instructors were that there were several students, corequisite students, that either wouldn't attend, didn't engage, or just didn't complete their work like their other classmates did. So from this data, we quickly realized that the matter wasn't ability, right? It was more circumstance or perception. And we also learned from the students that co-requisite courses carry a stigma or a label with them. They feel like it says they're not up to par with their classmates. And I can only imagine if you feel that way, that's not really going to give you the motivation to attend or to participate. There were also students who told us they didn't understand the value and they thought it was just extra work as opposed to like targeted support, right? So when we saw all of this as a whole, we quickly knew what we needed to do. Like I said, it wasn't the ability of the students, it was more competing priorities, real life obstacles, and misunderstood purposes, right? So we took this information and then that's how we formed what we wanted to change in our project.
Thanks so much, Shelley. And we're going to stick with you for our next question to talk a bit about the community building in co-requisite courses that ASU Mid-South is focusing on. So, how do you foster collaboration in your courses with your students?
Well, that was one of the major goals in our project was we wanted to build a stronger sense of community in the co-requisite classes. This is because we all know students learn best when they feel connected to each other, to the instructor, and to the learning process as a whole. Um, with the help of the grant, we were able to redesign our co-requisite classrooms with collaboration in mind, and this changed the feel completely, right? It's amazing. These classrooms are much more personal, they're flexible, they're welcoming, and it just it encourages students to talk to each other, to move about the room, right, and to share problem solving. So it's been a real blessing. Um, the rooms contain multiple breakout areas. They also have flexible furniture so that the desk and chairs could be rearranged within seconds. And we have walls of whiteboards. Now, these features aren't just decorative features, they're learning tools that we use every day to help the students learn and progress in a more meaningful way. For example, if students are working on material that is challenging or difficult for them, but they're not ready for instructor intervention, they can go to the breakout areas and work together, think aloud, compare approaches, and just know that they're not alone, right? I mean, there's somebody else in that with them. So physical flexibility of the classroom is another big benefit, and this is partially due to there's no desktop computers in these rooms. So this removes barriers and lets them feel much more free to move about. Um, they One student said that the rolling chairs take away from the seriousness of the course. So that kind of just it encapsulates how we want it, the informal feel, just to have them, relax and engage and just feel like it's their space more. When we went to online class, we had to think much more creatively, kind of think out of the box to build connection. And one strategy that we went with was interactive tools like word wall. This brought an air of play and competition to the assignments, and it made them feel less isolating and more engaging. Students were able to see how they can compare to their classmates, and I don't know, it just builds community even in the virtual.
Do you have any specific practices that you would recommend other instructors can try in their own classrooms?
Um, so if I were gonna recommend something to another instructor, I would say build opportunities for students to speak to each other, share problem solving, and also um, let each other see their thoughts, right? I mean, it just is really helpful. This can occur in many ways. You could use your physical space. It could be the activities you assign or even the interactive tools that you choose. But the most important thing is that we design moments where the students feel supported, connected, and capable.
Thank you so much, Shelley. I want to turn to Jason now. And Math Academy is this really amazing, successful program, but it's something that not every college might be able to do something similar at their own institution. So I'm wondering if there are key teaching and support practices in Math Academy that other institutions can consider implementing in their own courses.
Yeah, Math Academy is it's a large program. Like I said in the chat, about 10% of our math enrolled students participate. But its most powerful practices don't require scale to replicate. I'll share a little bit of what we believe any instructor or institution can carry into your own context. First, I would say embed peer support directly into the learning environment. Not advertising a tutoring center as somewhere to get support, but placing a peer tutor in the room. At Hartnell, we intentionally recruit new tutors each spring, and several of them are former dual enrollment students who are now enrolling at Hartnell as first-time college students. They bring credibility that no faculty member can manufacture. They're living proof that the path through college math is possible, right? So that is something that any of you can work on at your institution. Second is taking students to campus resources early. Don't announce where help lives, walk there with them. The physical act of orientation and wayfinding collapses the psychological distance that's between a student and the support they need. And I often say the heaviest weight at the gym is the front door, right? It's the same at our college campuses. If it's the tutoring center or your basic needs center, walking that student there is going to collapse that psychological barrier that they put up. The next activity that I think any math faculty or any of our developmental education faculty can build into their curriculum is culturally grounded group learning. And I think the core there is that it replaces passive instruction with collaborative problem solving and anchoring the math in students' real lives and real communities. This doesn't require special curriculum. It requires the intention to ask whose experience does this problem reflect and who gets to see themselves in the math. I think the last one I'll suggest, and probably the most portable of all, is normalizing help seeking and failing forward. When a professor and a peer tutor say out loud and early and often that struggle is expected and mistakes are data, it restructures the climate of the entire classroom. We create safety nets that catch students and give them the foundation to rebound and keep advancing through the rigorous material. As we look at expanding into dual enrollment, we're carrying all four of these practices directly into our communities throughout Monterey County. And one of the areas that we really saw as a math desert was South Monterey County. South Monterey County is rural. There's many underserved communities and math communities in the region. We looked at our state Smarter Balance assessment, and we saw that 78% of 8th graders and 81% of 11th graders are not meeting the state math standards. And furthermore, only 14% of our Latinx students are at grade level. So what we're doing is we're partnering with our local schools. We're working to secure student transportation, and we're going to host our pilot dual enrollment math academy at our college campus in Soledad, our Soledad Education Center. So we're meeting the students where they live rather than asking them to come to us. The last part about that pilot is that our college math faculty are going to team teach alongside our dual enrollment math faculty. And that's going to allow them to combine deep experience with active learning design and deep experience with high school aged youth. And that combination, we believe, will create a laboratory that develops faculty skills while it serves students at the same time. And the program hopefully will reproduce itself where our dual enrollment students become college students. The college, once they're here as first time in college students, they'll become peer tutors who will possibly be the face of the next cohort. And that's how we're hoping to scale the culture of Math Academy, not by copying exactly what we're doing, but by spreading a set of beliefs about how students learn and what they deserve.
Thank you so much, Jason. My next question goes to Mary Elizabeth. At CCBC, you're collaborating across English and math to pilot these interdisciplinary microlessons. How has that collaboration played out? In your view, what aspect of these microlessons has been most helpful for students?
Thanks. Well, students were struggling with the reading aspect that's required in an introductory stat class. And for those of you who aren't mathematicians, intro stat is a course that's entirely word problems. So if students can't decipher the text in the word problems, they cannot begin to approach the mathematical skills they need to solve them. So this seemed like a good partnership when we were sitting in our community of practice with English faculty and math faculty together. So it kind of came together on the fly over the summer. I invited a math faculty, or pardon me, English faculty to come in and just meet with me in my office, and we started talking about the ways we could help one another. And I was mentioning to my coworker that I would get way too far in the semester, and students were still asking me, "What does this symbol mean? What does that symbol mean?" And just quickly, she was like, "This sounds like a foreign language to me. Let's get some flashcards going in your class." And I was like, "Oh, wow!" So within a week, she was in my class helping students make flashcards. And what I loved about it, she showed her own humility. Like, listen, I haven't looked at this in years. I'm rusty. Let's make these together. So that was also a way for her to reach across to the students and say, "I'm in your shoes right now, and I want to help you." Um, all of our major assessments were revised in a collaborative method and with the English faculty, and we concentrated on replacing abstract scenarios that were just all over my word problems with references to Baltimore neighborhoods and local businesses. So students could focus on the math rather than spending all their energy trying to interpret the question. So that definitely helped. The English faculty came again. She came several times. It was great. And she did a growth mindset activity with the students with the theme, "I am a mathematician." And she brought stickers and had them do a small reflective writing assignment about the stickers they chose. And later, I saw the stickers on water bottles, computers, calculator cases. Students were really embracing it. And honestly, it was a delight to read their reflections. Through this process, their assessment scores were exceeding their own expectations. And with that, confidence grew with the students that, "Oh, wow, I am a mathematician. I can do this." I'll kind of go quickly here. I don't want to take up too much time. We co-facilitated review sessions for the test. So she was walking around with me, helping students break down the word problems so they knew exactly what math application they were going to use. And finally, one of the last things we did was the students had an opportunity to write their own questions or write a question for the test. So my English faculty colleague came in, gave a short lesson on credible sources, and then they were told to go out and write a problem on a particular topic. And so the students felt more engaged with the word problem because they were creating it. It was an active learning opportunity. And it overall helped them better understand, I think, some of the course material. And so forth. And so those were the micro lessons, as well as, as I mentioned earlier, as math faculty, we went into the English classes and tried to help promote taking their math soon. And I can also see future things we can do with the English classes. But at the time, we were just going in with the promotion sort of angle for completion. And I think that's about it.
Thank you so much, Mary Elizabeth. And lastly, I have a question for Erin. So at Volunteer State, you're engaged in faculty collaboration across mathematics, English, and reading, and you're focusing on faculty professional development, thinking about faculty mindset and teaching strategies. What led your team to focus on faculty and PD? How have you collaborated, and what has come out of that?
So, as a dean, this is where I both get to praise faculty and air a little bit of their dirty laundry. So we have had a massive number of curriculum-based changes to our developmental education program in the past, I think especially 3 to 4 years. So English, math, and reading have all made significant changes to how they are teaching those classes, how they are co-requisited, and what they think is best for the students. But what we found out the first time that we got the leadership of those areas to sit down together and talk about what they were doing is that they were moving in opposite directions in terms of the decisions that they were making around um, are these classes going to be pass fail? Or are they going to be graded for the co-requisite? Are we going to pair them with the same instructor or do we want separate approaches? So they were moving in opposite directions and they had no interest, they made it very clear, in being encouraged or forced to take a universal approach within the different subject areas. So we were looking for an opportunity for them to be able to address some of the common challenges that they were reporting in terms of an uptick in students who needed learning support, in terms of decreased preparedness, in terms of, in particular, increased students with learning differences, with behavioral challenges. All of those things were happening at the same time as we were making these curricular changes based on subject matter. And so what we realized is that we needed to create time and space for faculty to work on some of the skills issues that were unrelated or not specifically related to subject area. And when we created that space, so one of the first things we did was have a lunch and learn opportunity. You can get faculty to do almost anything with food. They're just like students. It's great. A lunch and learn opportunity for them to come in and just compare notes. Where are you seeing um, challenges? What works? What are you doing that works? So I distinctly remember sitting in on a really sort of excited and upbeat conversation about guided note taking in a statistics classroom. Um, so giving the faculty the chance to have those conversations pointed us toward the idea that we could build a sort of like-minded approach to student learning where no matter the subject, it was clear to students that the faculty had the mindset of believing in their success, right? That the faculty believed that the students could succeed, that the students could develop the skills related to math, related to reading, related to English, but also related to being a successful learner that would help them down the road. And some of that comes from us giving the faculty the chance to build the toolkit and their belief in their own ability to have a growth mindset and to develop those additional skills to support our learning support students. So what emerged was a summer institute where we can have some intensive time with faculty, um, a small group of faculty who've been incentivized with a $500 stipend to develop an intervention, to share that intervention with their colleagues. I mean, I'm not going to lie, we're basically stealing the community of practice from CCRC. And implement something, a small intervention in their fall courses, evaluate the outcomes, and then come back together as a group to discuss the success of that, right? It's a very simple intervention, but it is something that's measurable and it is something that creates the time and space for faculty to have those necessary conversations across disciplinary silos.
Thank you so much, Erin. So, really quickly for our last question, we wanted to emphasize again that this is sort of a cyclical process. So, as you're thinking about what's next for your practices, what are you looking for, data, observations, to help determine if your practice is helping the students who need support or if what you're doing needs some adjustment? And we can stick with Erin to start on this question.
So we will be looking at comparative outcomes for students for the faculty who are implementing the interventions from the Summer Institute. We have the data on their past teaching of learning support classes. We'll look specifically at the data for their classes, but we're also looking to build on that qualitative impact. Are we seeing greater satisfaction among faculty who are teaching learning support classes? Are we seeing that growth mindset implementation? You know, one of the conversations that we've had a lot as a team is around buzzwords and initiatives and the way that sometimes faculty become resistant to those. And one of those is growth mindset. We've seen a lot of that. But we are hoping that by allowing faculty to lead the approach that they want to take and to build off the expertise of one another and the support of one another, we'll see a greater uptick in that satisfaction and that will result in better outcomes for our students.
Thank you, Erin. Shelley, at Arkansas State University Mid-South, what are you all looking at?
Well, as we continue to refine our practices, we're going to continue looking at the same data, right? The attendance records, the course success rates, and listen to the instructors. These all have given us a really good picture of what what our students experience. What we expect in the future is to have an increase in attendance and success rates, as well as the instructors give us more positive feedback, and then have a decline in any concerns that they may have. We also are going to pay attention to the human side of the data, right? We know that what the students do and say really reflect how they feel and if they feel supported and valued. One encouraging trend that we've had over the last little while has been that students are requesting to take our co-requisite courses, right? And this is very powerful feedback. We know that this means that they're talking to one another about the courses, that and they're beginning to see the value of it, and also the stigma is beginning to fade. So that's really like powerful. Um, so our goal in the future is to evolve to meet our students exactly where they are and meet their needs, right? And then our commitment is to stay responsive, stay curious, and to continue refining our project until our outcomes match our students' potential.
Thank you so much, Shelley. Jason, what is the Hartnell team looking for?
Well, our evaluation framework is grounded in our student equity plan, and we're not just asking whether students pass, we're asking whether the students most historically underserved by higher ed are being reached and supported. For us, that means we're watching outcomes for non-traditional age students, for men of color, and for students with disabilities. And as we're defining success more broadly than course pass rates, we're tracking help-seeking behaviors as leading indicators. So we're looking at visits to the Panther Learning Labs, our tutoring center. We're looking at use of basic needs services, engagement with academic counseling, and connection to our disability support program. When Math Academy students are seeking help at higher rates than their non-Math Academy peers, we know the program is building something more durable than just a grade. We're building students who know how to use the institution. And that architecture lets us see not just whether the program works, but which combination of support drives the best outcomes and for whom. As we move into dual enrollment students, we're building those same indicators into the pilot from the start. We want to know whether a high school junior is connecting to support services, persisting through the course, and ultimately enrolling at Hartnell. And that long arc lets us see if the dual enrollment participant becomes a tutor, and the full measure of whether this investment is closing the equity gap that the regional Smarter Balance data so clearly shows us. We don't have all the answers yet, and we're really thankful that the community of practice has taught us how to ask better questions. And that is honestly how you know a practice is maturing, right? Not when we stop finding problems, but when our data gets precise enough to find the right solutions.
Thank you so much, Jason. And lastly, Mary Elizabeth, could you tell us what CCBC is looking for?
Yeah, so we have some instruments in place right now for assessing the student's satisfaction with the course. That is the statistics course where the micro lessons are being taught. And as you mentioned, in January, we had a think tank event where we invited all math and English faculty to like a half day event where we shared our experiences about our collaboration, and we were encouraging the faculty that attended to make their own connections with somebody in the opposite department and brainstorm some ideas. So rather than it being sort of a top-down initiative, like you must go into each other's classroom and do this, this, and this, we wanted it to be a little bit more organic and authentic so that people can connect with those that they have, similar maybe teaching philosophies with, and come up with some unique ideas. They could do some of the same things we were doing, certainly, but they could come up with some ideas. So we're still working on that, encouraging people to share out what they've done this past semester, and encouraging them to think into the fall as well. We are going to also we're going to look at some pass rates, for sure, and we're going to keep for our initiative to encourage students to take their math class sooner rather than, as I mentioned, last in some cases, we're going to need to work with our planning, research, and evaluation team to assess that data and to look and have to wait a few semesters out to see if we can sort of see a trend changing there. But that's where we are at the moment.
Thank you so much, Mary Elizabeth, and thank you again to all four of our panelists. It's been such an honor to hear about the work that you all are doing. I'm going to pass it back over to Amy at this point, who will briefly take us through some audience questions.
Thanks so much, Carl. And thanks everyone in the panel. It's been a great discussion so far. You're welcome to keep your videos on. We just spend a couple minutes on audience questions. I know many have been answered in the chat, so thanks for folks who have been responding in the chat. I wanted to bring up one question that I don't think has been directly addressed. One person was asking about for students who may not have had a strong algebra experience before coming to your institution, do you have any strategies that you have implemented for algebra students that have been successful? And this could be across the different practices or programs that you've been involved with through the community of practice. So it could be Math Academy, it could be the evolution of micro lessons for algebra context. Shelley, it could be in algebra context that you work in. Any ideas for instructors in that space?
Well, I know that like with our English in our are you asking about our collaborative rooms?
Just any teaching strategies that help students that in algebra who may not have had a strong algebra foundation
Oh, okay.
in high school.
Okay. So with the algebra, if they don't have a very strong foundation, um, we have skill sheets and they break all of the parts into like bite-sized pieces so it's easier to understand. That's how we start that's the second step of every SLA or our corequisite class. I generally ask if there's anywhere that they had questions about the lecture or like they were lost, right? And then we go over that slowly and step by step. Once they understand anything from the lecture, then we look at the skill sheets, which teaches them, like I said, in small increments, so it's easier to absorb. After that, that's when I like to use the I don't know, practice problems, and we go to the board and I write the practice problems on the board, and then I just tell them, don't find one that's easy for you. Take a partner, go and find one that's more challenging, and they'll work together. And then I just kind of monitor the room and see, they'll ask me when they're hung up, right? And then I go over and give little suggestions, and they'll usually just take off and run with it. So that's kind of how I do it when they have low, like a not much foundation in college algebra.
I'll just add two quick thoughts. I think one is really go back to that question I opened with. Instead of asking, are students ready? Ask yourselves, what are we doing to make them ready? And then think about some of the strategies that don't require a large scale math academy, like embedding a tutor in your class. I'll tell you that the other active learning that I see is group work. And if you read the CCRC blog around our practice at Hartnell, you'll start to get context on how active group work is emerging in the classroom.
Great. I think we are going to close the open Q&A for the moment. I know the time has been short for that, but folks can still respond in the chat, and I'm going to share folks' email addresses at the end. Please reach out to individual folks or groups of folks if you have further questions. I'm just going to close with a few takeaways from both the research activities we have done with the institutions and from the work of facilitating the community of practice more broadly. And these, I hope, are useful for folks listening when you think about what pieces of this work could you apply in your own contexts. So first, just wanted to reinforce the importance of using both data and observations for two, if not more, key purposes. to identify which students are not yet well served, and to inform the ongoing improvement of the practices that you're developing and refining over time. And we heard some examples of that from the panelists. Second, while each college in the community of practice took its own unique, locally informed approach to develop and implement innovative practices, there were several common student experiences that most or all of the colleges were trying to improve. For example, many practices aim to improve engagement and collaboration during class, to support students to see themselves as capable, to help students develop skills and attitudes that support their learning process, and to strengthen relationships between faculty, peers, and student support services at the college. Third, a great deal of developmental education reforms up until this point have been structural and have typically not offered faculty much flexibility or creativity in their implementation. Therefore, it's really valuable in this next phase of reform to provide faculty with that time and those resources to support their innovation. This community of practice is one example of how to do so, but that time and resources can take many different forms. And finally, this project has surfaced several ways to think about scaling. Across all of the teams, faculty collaboration has enabled faculty beyond the community of practice team to learn about and use new practices. Professional learning for all faculty teaching co-requisite or learning support courses has been a key focus for volunteer states team. And all of the teams have scaled practices across a course or across a discipline, with some teams also engaging in cross-disciplinary efforts. These strategies are helping to bring the practices more to the students who would most benefit from them. And I'll just close with a final slide that again reiterates that we have a recent report and inquiry tool. There's a QR code here, and there's been a link that's shared in the chat. So please take a look and reach out to us if you'd like to talk about this more or if you have any questions. Thank you so much for joining us today, and thank you again to our panelists, Jason, Mary Elizabeth, Aaron, and Shelley, to the college teams who have been a part of the community across the year, and to Carl for co-presenting. Please feel free to reach out to us via email with any questions following the webinar. Thanks so much for joining, and hope you have a great afternoon. It's been a really great ongoing conversation to have today. Thank you.